Hello and welcome to my channel. The video you're watching is the first lesson in a self-study tutorial on classical Chinese grammar. The tutorial is mainly meant to be a personal project, but in case I can help other people, I'm glad about that too. First, I want to give an introduction of my motivation and methodology in creating this tutorial. So why do I want to create a tutorial like this? The main reason is that I want to help myself fight procrastination, and having a public project and keeping it going is a good way to do that. So what kind of project can I create? As a professional linguist and a native speaker of Chinese, I came up with the idea of systematically learning the ancient version of my mother tongue. But apart from that, I also think this is a good exercise of knowledge sharing. I've seen some existing tutorials of classical Chinese on the internet, and I do think I have something special to offer, which means this is something good I can do to the world. So how will I proceed in my learning of classical Chinese? I will mainly follow the outline of classical Chinese grammar. But since the book has its own limits, I will enrich it with stuff from another textbook, von der Gabelentz's Chinesische Grammatik. Of course, I will also add in my own linguist's perspective, but I hope to mainly demystify the subject and demonstrate that classical Chinese is really just another human language. It has a regular lexicon and a regular syntax, so it's very learnable, and there's absolutely no need to be afraid of it. Here's a few more words on the script, the transliteration, and the linguistics in the tutorial. As for the script, I will mainly use the small seal script, which looks like this, for Chinese characters, accompanying it with the regular script, which looks like this. This is actually the printed style of the regular script. And I will very occasionally use the clerical script, which looks like this. I hope that the regular script and the clerical script will facilitate reading of the Chinese text, which will mainly benefit Chinese speakers. For those with little or no previous knowledge in the modern Chinese language, I think the small seal script actually makes more sense because it is the more authentic, more original script used at a time when classical Chinese was the main vehicle of communication. As for the transliteration, I will mainly use a regularized version of the old Chinese reconstruction system in Zheng Zhang Shangfang's book, the source of which is this website. I will accompany this with the Mandarin romanization system in von der Gabelentz's book because I find this system quite desirable in several aspects. A most important aspect of which is that it retains the historical features in its orthography, including the unreleased final stops. Modern Chinese users may find the script and the romanization systems I adopt in this tutorial a bit alien, but that's exactly the point of learning. Classical Chinese is very different from modern Chinese in any case, and the deliberately ancient-looking presentation in this tutorial can help us experience that difference in a better way. Last but not least, I present all examples in a professional linguistic format in this tutorial, that is, with interlinear glosses and everything. And I will freely use generative linguistic terminology as well, since these notes are mainly meant for my personal use. But the grammatical points are actually straightforward enough, even without the background linguistic knowledge. So in this first lesson, I will learn the various ways to form nominal predicates in classical Chinese and in pre-classical Chinese, mainly including the classical particle lao, the pre-classical copulate gui, and the classical copulate guao. Even though I use these reconstructed phonological forms and try to pronounce them, that's not the main point because in this tutorial, I will mainly be learning the grammar, aka the syntax of this ancient language, whereas the phonetics or the phonological forms are only secondary. The rest of the lesson can be found in the accompanying PDF, and if you have access to Pulleyblank's textbook, the theme of this lesson corresponds to Chapter 3 in the textbook.
Now let's begin. We start with the classical particle lao, which is the first way to form a nominal predicate in classical Chinese. Okay. In fact, classical Chinese did have a copula, guao, but this word was seldom used, and the more common way to form a quasi-copular construction was with the aid of the sentence final particle lao. We begin with the basic function, aka assertion. Assertion means we want to assert a predicate to be true of a subject, or more exactly, a topic. In other words, the particle lao turns a predicate into an assertive comment. As for the category of the predicate, it is most typically nominal, or at least a nominalized constituent, but a verbal predicate is also allowed, because one can certainly assert a verbal predicate to be true as well. Here, let's see this example in 1a. I will try to read this out. Tuk dia pun lao, zlu dia mad lao. Or in Mandarin, it sounds something like tek je pen ye, cai je mot ye. A word-for-word reading of the sentence is virtual, nominalizer, root, assertive particle, which means virtual is the root, or virtual is the cause. And the second half of the sentence means wealth, nominalizer, branch, assertive particle. In English, this would be translated as something like wealth is the branch or the effect. Okay, so we can understand the structure of the sentence like this, which means that the matter of virtual, or the thing that we call virtual, is the root. So we say, as for virtual, it is the root, and as for wealth, it is the branch. That's how this lao construction works. Let's look at another example in 1b, which says tian's tia, tian's lao. Okay, again, we see this nominalizer, which basically means the matter of something something, and in this case, it's the matter of governing. Okay, what is the matter of governing? What is governing? This is actually giving a definition to the concept governing. Okay, so governing is rectifying. Exactly what this English translation renders, right? Governing is rectifying. Okay, so it's quite simple. Here's another example, which reads, clean laos, tu lu, pak lao, go lao, cow lao, mrang lao. Okay, so a lot of assertions. So what are the nominal predicates that we're asserting? Well, first things first, let us identify the thing we want to comment on. So this bit is the topic, heaven, earth, and then genitive marker, way. The way of heaven and earth, this is the thing we want to comment on, and we do this commenting by the several lao phrases. Bak lao, so it's wide, it's thick, it's high, and it's bright. Notice that while in the English translation, these predicates look like adjectives, they can also be interpreted as nominalized adjectives, which means the way of heaven and earth is wideness, thickness, highness, and brightness. And that is indeed how the sentence is rendered in its modern Chinese translation. The next point is the negation of lao predication. So we have learned how to form a nominal predicate with the final particle lao, but how do we deny it? We use a different syntactic structure. So here in 2, we begin with the positive structure. We have a nominal phrase followed by lao, which means it is that nominal phrase. And then to negate this, we put a particle pull in front of the nominal phrase. So this bit here is exactly the same as the positive template. We just put a pull in front of that. And pull just means is not or be not. Okay. Here in 3, we see an example. Pull ngao lao, brang lao. So again, we have 2 laos, but the distinction between the 2 lao phrases is that the first phrase here is negative, whereas the second phrase is positive. So what this sentence means is basically that something is not something, but something. Yes, in the translation below, we can see it means it is not me, but the weapon. When we look at the original classical Chinese sentence, it says, not I, assertive, weapon, assertive, right? Here's a bit more information on the negative particle pu, which is written in this way, okay? And in the Mandarin is pronounced fei. This is actually a fusion of the regular verbal negator, pu, okay, plus the pre-classical copula gui. So pu plus gui becomes pu, okay? The fusion is actually more obvious in another reconstruction system of Old Chinese, the BS system here, because in that other system, the pronunciations actually do add up in a quite accurate way. In that system, the verbal negator is pronounced b, and the pre-classical copula is gui, and b plus gui becomes bai. Theoretically speaking, since the function of the copula gui and the function of the assertive sentence final particle lao are the same, lao in the negative form in 3 is actually superfluous. And it is indeed stylistically omitted sometimes. And on that note, lao itself can be omitted too, even in a positive form. Here's 2 examples. For A, which is from Zhuangzi, it says, Slu pul nga, kan de nga tu rao, which means you, in an honorific form, you not fish, which means you are not fish. So pul here is used alone, without an additional lao. But of course, that lao can be added back in, which would make the sentence become Slu pul nga lao. Okay, it would mean exactly the same thing, but stylistically, that lao is omitted. The second half of the sentence further explains what the first half means. So it says, how can you know fish is joy? So how do you know that fish do not feel happy, since you're not fish yourself, right? And in the B sentence, Plig sning hlungs tu kra, which says necessarily 1,000 chariots, a genitive marker, family. So necessarily a family of 1,000 chariots. This is describing a kind of family, and it is a big nominal predicate. Usually we would end this kind of sentence with a lao, plig snin hlungs tu kra lao. Okay? But again, here the lao final particle is omitted. The reason why pul and the lao co-occur in the negative form of nominal predication, as we have seen in 3, is probably that by the classical period of Chinese, the pre-classical copula gui had become obsolete, and the originally bimorphemic pul got reanalyzed as a monomorphemic negator that just selects a nominal phrase. Okay, so that's probably what happened in history. Now let's turn to the use of the final particle lao in combination with other sentence final particles. So depending on the type of the sentence, lao can be used in combination with another sentence final particle, such as the interrogative ga or the perfect aspect glu. And the stacked sentence final particles went through phonetic fusion, so lao plus ga became la, or la with a longer vowel. So la with a shorter vowel mainly occurred in confusion texts from the Lu state, whereas the version with a longer vowel, la, mainly occurs in texts from other Warren states. So that's the fusion of the assertive particle lao and the interrogative particle ga. As for the fusion of lao and glu, when they are joined, we get lu. So lao plus glu becomes lu. But the fusion mechanism was probably not properly understood in history by later scribes, because we can see various doubly stacked sentence final particles in surviving versions of the confusion texts. So the fusion theory here is from Pulleyblank's textbook, and of course there are alternative theories regarding these stacked sentence final particles in classical Chinese, but we will leave them aside in this simple beginner's tutorial. Now let's look at some examples, beginning with 5a. Ma gual nga mans nie lao ga. In Mandarin, it would sound like wu wei wu wang ye hu. And in English, it's translated as, didn't you think that I was waiting for you? So what's interesting here is that first we have a lao, the assertive particle lao, and what is its scope? Well, we know that lao is added to a nominal predicate, but there's no obvious nominal here. So that probably means the embedded clause, which is the object of think, is nominalized underlyingly. So that is the nominal predicate that lao introduces, which means we have a further layer of bracketing here. So nga mans nie lao is the predication. And then the question particle ga is actually not immediately imposed on the lao phrase. It is imposed on the entire sentence instead. So the overall skeleton of the sentence should be, didn't you think? And then question mark. So the question mark goes with didn't you think, which means in the original classical Chinese sentence, it's ma gual ga. This is the outer structure, and the lao phrase is the inner structure. But in the linear word order, lao and ga do appear next to each other, which makes their fusion possible. Now let's look at the sentence in B. Tu klong de gu sang bans nu through tu la. Let's first look at the English translation. It says, did Duke of Zhou send him, that is Guan Shu, knowing he'd rebel? So the speaker is questioning this act of Duke of Zhou. Like, it's not really a well-considered decision, right? Because if someone is going to rebel, why would you send them? But let's come back to the structure of the sentence. So here, tu klong is the subject. De gu san bans. This looks like sort of an adverbial, knowing that he will rebel, right? So it corresponds to this bit. And then there's a conjunctive. The conjunctive joins the adverbial with the main verb phrase of the sentence. So the Duke of Zhou employed Guan Shu, which is rendered by a pronoun here, knowing that he will rebel. This whole part is modifying the main verb phrase. And the question we should naturally ask is, to which layer of the sentence structure do we add la? And remember, la is bimorphemic here, which means it's a fusion of two morphemes, one of which is the assertive particle lao, and the other is the question particle ga. Well, in this case, we cannot really find a nominal constituent, but remember that lao can also be added to a verbal predicate, even though it is typically added to nominal predicates. Okay? So here, if we decompose la into lao and ga, the lao part would go with the entire part here. So Duke Zhou employed Guan Shu with the knowledge that he would rebel someday. So that is the state of affairs that is being asserted. And then the question particle is added to that entire assertion because the speaker is asking the listener to confirm whether this is true. So again, I'm adding a further layer of bracketing. So la goes with, okay, I'll change another color. So la goes with the entire clause, whereas ga goes with the entire clause plus lao. Okay, so it's quite complicated. All right, that's the second example. Now let's turn to the third example, which reads, 东鲁考试中填lao la. So here, interestingly, we see lao, which is the final particle, and the fused form la being stacked together. So it's grammatically not really correct, but to understand what the sentence is intended to say, we can simply regard this la, this fused form, as a simple question particle. Okay, so we can simply delete this. As usual, since this is a question, we want to first find the statement that it is based on, which in this case is the assertion, 东鲁考试中填lao. As for Zhongyu, we can let him follow governing. Or in more natural English, as for Zhongyu, we can let him become a government official. So that's the statement. And when we add the question particle to that statement, the sentence becomes a yes-no question, which is, can we let him become a government official? The final example in D says, 古天书啦. Here we have a single fused form la as the longer version, and to correctly interpret this sentence, we need to find the assertion first. So what is being asserted? It is this whole thing. Its true color. The subject of the sentence is omitted, so it's roughly saying that is its true color. So that's the assertion. So here, its true color is the nominal predicate, and la turns that nominal predicate into a yes-no question. Next, let's turn to the fusion of lol with the perfect aspect marker glue. So according to Pulleyblank, the unfused form lao glue is actually never attested. But there are numerous occurrences of the doubly stacked forms, like lao lu and lao lu glue. Let's first take a look at the sentence in 8a. Die Rongskug lu, which literally means this disorderly country, a perfect assertion. But what does a perfect assertion mean? As we can see in the English sentence, it means this is a disorderly country as one can tell upon entering it. We know that the perfect aspect denotes, roughly speaking, a change of state. But here the change of state is not the state denoted by the nominal predicate, but the mental state of the speaker. So, which is why the sentence can be translated into English as something like, now I realize, blah, blah, blah. All right? So if we decompose this lu into more basic forms, it should become lao, the assertive particle, plus the aspect marker glue, right? So first, lao is added to a nominal predicate, Ronsklug, and this chunk is a comment on the subject topic, this. All right, so that means this is a disorderly country. And then on top of that, we add the perfect aspect layer, glue, which further embeds this assertion into a change of the speaker's mental state. I realize that this is a disordered country. Similarly, in 8b, we have a sentence, Krum ru glu ma nu guao lao lu. Okay. Again, we can regard the fused form lu simply as a perfect particle, so we can ignore this repeated assertive part. All right. And our task is to find out the scope of the particle lao and that of the particle lu. Okay, so this is the first half of the sentence. And in the second half, it says not have, can do. Since not have usually would require a nominal object, the can do part is probably nominalized underlyingly. So it means something that one can do, right? So not have anything that one can do. That's the part, the lao, the assertive particle is applied to. And in this case, it's not a nominal predicate, but a normal verbal predicate. So lao is applied to ma nu guao. And this big chunk in turn is embedded in the subject-oriented change of mental state marked by the final particle lu, which makes the sentence mean something like, I realize that there's nothing I can do now. Now let's look at the sentence in 8c. Sche lag mans nin lao lu glu. Here we have three sentence final particles being stacked. Lao is the assertive particle, lu is the fused form, and glue is the perfect particle. And this stacking is probably stylistic, which means we can simply ignore the fused form in the middle when we want to understand the meaning of the sentence. The sentence says, this also reckless person. So it's quite obvious. Reckless person here, mans nin, is a nominal predicate, right? And we're asserting this by law to be true of the subject this, right? And then the whole chunk here, the whole assertion is embedded again in a change in the speaker's mental state, which is indicated by glue. So the whole sentence means, I have realized now that this is just another reckless person. So the general pattern here is actually pretty easy to follow. We have some sort of predicate, which is turned into an assertion by law. The assertion is in turn turned into a change of mental state of the speaker by the perfect aspect marker glue. And the two particles can be fused into lu, which is what we see in these examples, like lu, lu, and lu. All right. So that's the section on the combination of the assertive final particle lao and other sentence final particles. Now let's turn to the pre-classical copulate gui. So we have seen that the sentence final particle lao served quasi-copular purposes only from the classical period on. Let's change back to the blue color. And in the pre-classical period, that is the period before Confucius' time, there had been a real copula in the Chinese language. But like many other function words in the Sinitic languages, this one was versatile in its actual usage too. Let's first take a look at its copulative usage. Let's first take a look at the sentence in 9a. Ngal sang ngal kang, gui lang gui gu. In English, it means I offered up and I made sacrifices. It was rams and it was bulls. So gui, which appears twice in the sentence, can be easily translated into English as was or is. Similarly, in 9b, la gui plans longs tug, where la gui means I am. And here we have a verbal phrase, which is probably an elliptical relative clause, something like I am a person who listens to and follows virtue. So the basic usage of the copula gui is just like that of the be verb in English. For example, if you want to say A is B. In pre-classical Chinese, this would be A, gui, B. The copulative gui is clearly more than just a be verb. Von der Galebentz provides three translations for it in German: sein, existieren, and werden, which in English would be exist, and become. This suggests that gui very likely had other grammatical functions that are usually associated with the be verbs in familiar European languages too, such as the quasi-passive voice marking function. In 11, it says ngal mun gui guad. In English, I hear, it is said. The word-for-word translation is I hear is say or is said. This kind of direct speech construction is very common in shuking, often just in the form gui guad, it is said. The second salient usage of gui is as a topic marker. And here the term topic is construed broadly as either a normal left periphery topic or a low topic. We begin with the first scenario and first look at the sentence in 12a. Gui lians mlam muns sags guan. Gui guan kug muns sags lians. This is quite a mouthful. It's a sentence that consists of two parts, each of which begins with a gui, which I glossed here as a topic marker. Apparently, it is fronting something as a topic and then making a comment on that topic. That should be the basic structure of the two sentences. And that guess is indeed confirmed by the English translation. As for the wise, if he had no prudent consideration, would behave like a madman. And as for the mad, if he could consider things prudently, he would behave like a wise man. So here, the topics are gui clings and gui guan. So gui clings means the wise or the wise man, and gui guan means the mad or the madman. Now let's turn to the sentence in 12b. Gui mu snu, guang snis ka gal snrag. In this case, what is fronted as a topic is not a subject or even an argument of the verb. It is an adverbial instead. It is the temporal adverbial mus gu, which is the name of a particular day on the Chinese calendar. And the sentence just says that on this day, the king halted or stopped at the northern bank of the river. Now we turn to the low topic marking we. The low topic had similar grammatical status to the high topic, and it is just lower on the syntactic tree. The first example we look at is in 13a, which reads Nen Guang Gui Bo Longs. The verbatim translation is Ning King, low topic marker, divination, follow. So apparently, Ning Guan is the subject and longs is the verb, whereas this part is the direct object. Direct objects normally would follow the verb, so its original position should be here. However, with the help of gui, the direct object is fronted. Hence the surface word order we observe divination follow instead of follow divination. Similarly, in sentence B, nu grub guang quiz gui tu jiu grang. This sentence consists of two parts. The first part lays out the background. Then with King Qi, the subject of the sentence is King Qi's wife. So it says that King Qi's wife, together with King Qi, did something, and that something is specified in the second half of the sentence, where we have a topicalized direct object, took. Took means virtue, and it is fronted to the left of the verb with the help of gui, the topic marker. Interestingly, it is not only fronted, but also resumed by a resumptive pronoun, zi, which is just the third person accusative pronoun here. This pattern is also quite common. So when a direct object is fronted some distance away from its original position in the verbal phrase, then it is often resumed by the pronoun do or some equivalent thereof. So let's take a look at the C sentence. Gui mrongs lu die, kus ngaus ngau die sax. Again, this sentence consists of two parts, which have the same structure. In the first half of the sentence, the topicalized constituent is sluggishness and diversion, gui mrongs lu. And in the second half of the sentence, the topicalized part is ngaus ngau. And notice that in the second half of the sentence, the topic marker gui is actually omitted, but we can fill it back. What we should pay attention to in this sentence is that there is another resumptive pronoun. It's just the demonstrative this, die. So the tu here and the dies here are both resumptive pronouns when a direct object has been fronted. So, for example, when we want to say something like, we like classical Chinese. So in this sentence, classical Chinese is the direct object, right? But if we topicalize it by gui, the sentence would become something like gui classical Chinese, and then we could resume it by du or die, and then like. Again, the subject of the sentence we can be safely omitted because Chinese is a radical prodrug language. Very convenient. So this would be the structure of the sentence. We don't yet know how to say like or classical Chinese in pre-classical Chinese, but we do know the structure the sentence would be assuming. Apart from the copulative and the topic marking uses, gui could also be used for various emphatic or focalizing purposes in pre-classical Chinese, and this was actually the origin of its modern-day meaning only. The emphatic gui is often hard to translate since what is emphasized is not necessarily a constituent in the sentence, but may also be some grammatical force. So let's first take a look at the sentence in 16a. Krum gao gad klam dao gooks. Ngao gui das krus nier hlis kuk ming mrens. Or in Mandarin, Kim wo hot gam do gao, wo wei da jiang si guok ming ming. In English, it would be, why do I dare speak so much now? It is because I want to greatly alleviate the lives of the populace living in the 4 states of yours. In this sentence, what gui emphasizes is a reason for a question. The reason why I dare speak so much is because I want to greatly alleviate blah blah blah. That means gui has its scope over the entire second clause here. And notice that even though wei has scope over the entire clause, it doesn't appear to the very left of the sentence, so it doesn't appear here, but appears between the subject and the rest of the sentence. So that's something quite interesting. And in the B sentence, we sleeves put sleeve. It says put what is not orderly in order. I emphasize this. So what is emphasized in this case is the verbal action, sleeves, to put something in order. And why is that emphasized? Well, probably because there are things that are not orderly. So there's a contrast between something that is negative, not, and some positive action that is being promoted by the speaker, hence the emphasis we. Likewise, in the C sentence, mlang pul slu gui grang, we also see some sort of polar contrast, okay? So the sentence says it was nothing but alcohol that it got involved in. The nothing but part is already emphatic, and the speaker is using gui probably to make the strength of the verb equivalent to that of its argument. And in the sentence in D, mlang gu bud ku gui kuz kot slum, not say, not can, emphatic, prepare a possessive pronoun, heart. So in English, it's like one should not say that he cannot do it, but should devote his heart to it instead. Again, we see a contrast between something that is negative and something that is positive. And what is being emphasized here is the positive part of the contrast. Okay, prepare one's heart. And again, the emphatic gui is used immediately to the left of the verb. Finally, the sentence in E is from the classical period, and in this sentence, gui is not used in its pre-classical emphatic sense, but is merely used as a focalizing modifier. So it's gui nin jia, means only those who are conscientious. So the above examples represent all the major uses of gui in both pre-classical and classical Chinese.
So here's a quick review of the grammatical points in Lesson 1. In classical Chinese, nominal predicates are mainly formed by the assertive sentence final particle lao in the form of A, B, lao, A is B, or A, dia, B, lao, the matter of A is B. Occasionally, one can also introduce a nominal predicate with the copula guao in the form A guao B, which means A is B. In pre-classical Chinese, nominal predicates are mainly formed by the copula gui in the form A gui B, which means A is B. Both the classical lao and the pre-classical gui can be used as topic markers apart from their nominal predicate introducing function. The classical guao is a multifunctional verb with a wide range of meanings, from be, become, do, to act as. And in this lesson, we have only encountered its usage as the be verb. Finally, the classical sentence final particle lao can be stacked and fused with other sentence final particles, such as the interrogative particle ga and the perfect aspect particle glu. These are the main points I have learned in Lesson 1, which is Chapter 3 in Pulleyblank's textbook. I will keep learning classical Chinese and keep compiling my notes into new lessons, so stay tuned if you're interested in this series.